Welcome to Great Taste on KICI 105.3 FM in Iowa City. I'm Steve Bosch, your host, and I'm very pleased to spend a little bit of time with filmmaker and pizza aficionado Matteo Troncone. Matteo made an amazing film called Arrangiarsi, and I would certainly want him to tell you all about that film. And as part of the discussion, we're going to really delve into some of the food aspects of the movie, which frankly are some of my favorite foods: pizza, olive oil, all the mozzarella, the other ingredients that are all a part of it. So before I get so carried away that I'm going to have to actually stop the interview and go find something to eat, let me introduce Matteo Troncone to all of you. Hi, Matteo.
Ciao, Stefano. Hi, Steve.
Yeah,
Thanks
great
for having me.
Oh, great to talk with you. And of course, it was great having you here in Fairfield, Iowa, a number of months ago to show your film to packed audiences twice. And it was great. We really enjoyed the experience, appreciated your coming here. And of course, we were salivating the whole time too, as we listened to your story. So would you just describe the film a little bit and also the process that went on as far as how you ended up making it?
The process was a 8-year-long process, actually, and I initially just started out to make a film about pizza because when I was in Naples and had the pizza there, everything had changed. I said to myself, what have I been eating my whole life? I've never really eaten pizza before until this moment. So then at that point, I decided that I wanted to make a film just about the secret of Neapolitan pizza. How could they make anything that beautiful, that simple, that exquisite, quite frankly, this incredible work of art? How do they do it? What is the secret? So that was the initial genesis of the film. And then the film, once I started making it, morphed into something else. And pizza became not only one of the main subject matters of the film, but it also became a metaphor for this other art form that the Neapolitans are known as being the masters of, and that is Arrangiarsi, the art of making something from nothing, the art of overcoming an obstacle. And come to find out, pizza is a beautiful example of that.
Yeah, and the thing about this making something out of nothing that you're talking about, can you tell us how that plays out in the film and maybe just give us an example?
Yes, well, the film in the opening sequence opens up with me basically at the start of the film losing pretty much everything. My place to live, my relationship, my job, several other relationships actually. And so I moved into a 1985 VW camper van, and I decided to actually get off the wheel, as they say, and live in the van. So that was kind of, along with going to Naples, that was both the start of this film. And then I realized when I went to Naples, I had a free ticket, by the way, and I went and I started filming. I was there for 18 days, and a friend of mine from the north of Italy came down to Naples, and she looked at my footage and she said, "Oh my God," she said, "you're really not just making a film about pizza, you're actually more so making a film about Arrangiarsi, the art of being resourceful," is another good definition. So it was kind of evidence that my soul knew what the film was about before my head. I just thought I was making a film about pizza. And then I realized also very quickly that I was actually living Arrangiarsi. I was living this film of always finding an artful way of getting by, of making something out of nothing, and then very quickly put pizza together with Arrangiarsi. The masters of pizza making, of course, are known all over the world as the Neapolitans. That's where pizza was invented, but they're also known all over Italy as being the masters of Arrangiarsi. So from that point on, I knew that I had a really good, I would say, thesis, a really good theme for the entire film. And then the rest was kind of living my life and all the crazy adventures that I had in the van, which ended up being 5 years in the camper van, 8 years in total to making the film. But I knew that I, of course, wanted to film the olive harvest. I wanted to film at a San Marzano tomato farm near Naples. I knew that I would have to go to the Caputo flour factory to film how they mill the flour. And of course, Italy's only organic buffalo mozzarella farm, Banulo. I had to go there. I knew those things were going to be in the film for sure, all of the street artists and all the other crazy, wacky characters, those were a lot more serendipitous.
Well, I think since you've basically described some of these, what I would call critical elements of the foods that are featured in the film, I think we need to explore them, because I know that what you've done for me, for many of the other people that have been able to watch the film, just in relation to the food elements, is you've given us an education as to what we should not only look for when we're out and having a pizza, but also what type of ingredients we want to utilize if we're going to attempt to make pizza at home. So the first thing though, before we get into the actual ingredients of the pizza itself, I want you to, if you don't mind, just go over the three critical elements. And I don't remember the name of this particular pizza maker in the movie, but there were three critical elements that he mentioned to you that were important for making a great pizza. And that was the baker, the pizzaiolo, the pizza maker, and the oven itself.
Yes, correct. Well, the oven, we'll just start with the oven. Those most Neapolitan pizzerias, especially the ones that have sprung up in the United States, but all over the world, they're usually made by a few different oven manufacturers. One of them being Stefano Ferrara, is a very famous and very renowned oven maker. And those ovens are about anywhere from $10,000 to $15,000, depending on the size. And the ovens are very, very important because rather than using an electric oven or a coal-fired oven, when you have a wood-burning oven, there's three different types of heat, actually. Of course, you have the heat that's on the base of the oven that's coming up through the pasta, through the crust of the pizza. But you also have the heat from the coals of the fire and the fire. And then you also have a swirling heat that is just very chaotic, and it's random, and that is cooking the pizza also in a somewhat unpredictable but a beautiful way. So that's the only way you're going to be able to make a Neapolitan pizza. And these ovens are able to get up to about 900 to 1,000 degrees. Ideally, you want your oven temperature to be between 850 to 1,000 degrees. And by law, in Naples at least, the pizza can only be cooked no more than 90 seconds. An average pizza is about 60 seconds. So that's the oven situation right there. Now the baker, I would say is quite likely the most important job, is to, with years of skill, to know how to turn the pizza when it's, and to predict the heat, and to keep an eye on the temperature. And a lot of this is just done simply by experience and by having a good eye. A really good fornaio in Naples, you will see them actually lift the pizza. Sometimes at the very end, they'll lift it into the top of the oven, and that's where obviously it's a lot hotter, but there's also a lot of smoke there, and it'll give the pizza an even more smoky flavor that will come from whatever type of wood, of course, they're using. Another secret that good fornaio will use when cooking a pizza, they'll put the pizza peel, that big spatula. Sometimes they're metal, sometimes they're wood. They're usually metal. They'll put that pizza peel on top of the pizza while the pizza is being cooked. And the reason why they're doing that is they're allowing the heat to get at the crust and to get at the base of the pizza, but you don't want to overcook the toppings. The cheese, for instance, definitely don't want to overcook buffalo mozzarella or basil or any of these things. So they'll put the peel on top of that, so it's cooked in a more even way, actually, so it's not burnt on top. So that's the fornaio. And then of course the pizzaiolo, the pizza chef, that's a very, very important job as well, because they're the people who are making the dough, and they're stretching the dough. And one of the most important things is to get a good rising, of course, to get a fermentation process that creates a tremendous amount of oxygen. And their job is to take that oxygen from a good rise of the dough, which typically in Naples, a very good pizzeria is going to be 18 to 24 hours. By law in Naples, it has to be between 8 and 10, or somewhere around there. That's the minimum, 8 to 10 hours. But most really good places the rise is sometimes a double rise. It's 18 hours, 24 hours, something like that. So once you have a good rise, the job of the pizzaiolo, the pizza chef, is to get that oxygen and to get it on the outside of the disc, so that when it hits a very, very hot oven, there's a chemical explosion, and then it becomes very, very light and puffy and tender and moist on the outside of the pizza, whereas the center of the pizza is still paper thin and I would say slightly wet and floppy. So those are the three elements that you have to coordinate to make a really, really good Neapolitan pizza.
And then underneath, when they are going to, looking, they're trying to decide when that perfect moment is to take it out. There's something that they look for at the bottom, they think they call leoparding, as far as the bottom of the pizza is concerned.
Yeah. A very good fornaio is always checking underneath the pizza, lifting it up slightly to seeing if there's that leoparding. You want a good Neapolitan pizza will have that leoparding. You'll have charred marks, not too many. Sometimes I see, particularly in the United States at a Neapolitan pizzeria, there'll be too many charred marks. You want a few, but not too many. But they're always checking underneath. And again, the oven temperature is really, really important, and keeping an eye on that. And you can screw up a Neapolitan pizza in about 5 to 10 seconds if you're not paying attention to the temperature, or you're just not paying attention to the pizza. It's very, very easy to screw one up, and very, very difficult to make a beautiful one. So it's quite an art and skill.
I love that you said that, Matteo, because I was just going to say, I think that maybe a lot of people who aren't familiar with all the intricacies of the process look at it like, here's an oven, it's really hot, it's got some logs in it, and they take a disc of dough and they throw it in there, they put some sauce on top and some other stuff, and in 90 seconds it's finished. It's a pretty simple thing. But it really is, as you said, an intricate process. And I get a kick out of just listening to you too, because I've had Neapolitan pizzas in the States that have come out that were more than leoparding on the bottom, like you mentioned. Very interesting. And then I've also had probably the opposite effect, where there's absolutely not only is there no leoparding on the bottom, but there's no char anywhere on the top of the crust to even kind of note that it was in a hot oven. And I remember asking this one guy at this one place, I said, why do you cook your pizzas like that? Because I don't think that's really the way that they're supposed to be cooked, looking for these other elements. And he said, yeah, I know you're right, but that's the way the owner wants to do it.
Yeah, well, I'm not surprised to hear that response, actually. It's kind of typical. There are a lot of Neapolitan pizzas that are certified by the VPN, the Verace Pizza Napolitana, the Association of Pizza Makers, that are certified in the United States. There are a lot of those pizzerias, in fact, that are modifying the way that they cook it to suit the tastes of what Americans are used to and what they prefer. Americans tend to prefer a crispier pizza and in a certain way, just because that's all that they have known. Where in Naples, you have a tradition since 1600 at the very least of people cooking it in these very, very hot ovens. And so the skill of the pizza maker and the fornaio, the baker, is to be able to create something that is simultaneously wet, tender, moist, yet fully cooked, with a very high rise on the crust, but the crust is not dried out. It's not crackery. It's not stiff. It's the best way I could describe a really beautiful Neapolitan pizza is that it's alive. And when it goes in the oven, it's alive, and when it comes out, it's just as alive. It's just slightly transformed. And you're never ever going to be able to get that with an electric oven or a gas oven. I've seen people with gas ovens, in fact, at the Pizza Expo in Las Vegas, which they have every year. In March, I've seen very good pizza chefs be able to replicate pretty close a Neapolitan pizza using a gas oven. But they have the temperature obviously is very, very high, and they really know what they're doing. These are people who have been doing this for many, many years. It's still not the same, but it's very, very close, because again, the other element of the wood burning oven is you're getting that wonderful flavor from the wood and the smoke. And obviously you can't get that in gas or coal. It's just never going to happen. And an electric oven, forget it. I mean, I've seen pizza, like the pizzeria that's featured in my film, Starita, which is, I think this last year was voted #7 in the world. And it's obviously a favorite in Naples with the locals. And I'm really happy that I was able to film there. But I know for a fact that Pepe Starita is able to make a pretty good Neapolitan pizza in an electric oven. But it takes an incredible amount of skill, and it's still not the same. I mean, he will tell you that it's still not the same. So, got to have a wood burning oven.
Right.
So that's the dream. Every backyard to have a wood burning oven.
I'm going to throw another element in there. It's an element that I particularly am sensitive to in terms of when I notice a pizza that stands out to me. And you hit on it, and that is when that pizza goes in the oven, it's alive, and when it comes out of the oven, it's alive. And for me, a lot of that has to do with, and it may sound a bit esoteric, and so if it does, it does, but it has to do with the hands of that person who is putting that pizza together. The one who is making the dough, not only making the dough, but the person who is actually, forming the pizza into the proper shape, putting on the toppings, and then watching it through its entire process and cutting it. And you will see this in a lot of Neapolitan pizza places. That's the same person. It's the owner, and that person is the one who's taking the entire responsibility for the actual creation of the product from start to finish. And so that's that extra element for me. It's this element of the hands of that person who somehow that's transmitting an extra element of liveliness to that particular pizza. And when I think about the experiences that I've had with pizza, the ones that stand out are the ones where I've actually been able to kind of had that experience. It's just a different level of satisfaction, I guess, for me anyway, personally.
Indeed, I completely agree. In fact, having eaten about 400 pizzas in Naples during the making of this film, I quickly realized that whenever I'd go into a pizzeria like Starita, for instance, which is one of the other reasons why I wanted to film there, was if a pizzeria is full of life and people are happy there and they're joyful and they're joking around, the pizza is going to be good. If you go into a place, and there were places in Naples where I'd go in there and it was dead. The energy was dead. The people didn't seem like they were having a good day, or they didn't seem happy, or there was stuff going on that it wasn't full of joy. The pizza wasn't as good, even if they're using great ingredients, even if they're using great techniques, which primarily, I mean, everybody in Naples is going to have most of these things right off the bat, but everything is energy. Everything is energy. And even the vice president of the Pizza Association in Naples, Massimo Di Porzio, his response in my film was the most esoteric or perhaps spiritual answer that I got from pizza makers, was that he says that the soul of the city, the soul of Naples, is what goes into the pizza, and you can actually taste it. And that's one of the main differences, is that you're never going to get a pizza outside of Naples without the soul. So you're never going to, there's always going to be that difference. You can come to the United States and do all the right things and it'll be very, very good. But there's something very, very special about Naples that is unlike any other place in Europe or the world, actually. And it's a city that once you're there, it's almost unlivable in a way, because it's so chaotic and it's so frenetic and full of energy and creativity, and it's very high energy. But when you leave, you miss it. It kind of stays in you like a drug in a sense, and that's something that goes into the pizza clearly. So in Naples, the tradition, as you had mentioned, Steve, is very typically the person who is making the pizza is the owner of the pizzeria, which is a completely different paradigm than in the United States or perhaps other places in the world, I don't know, where, oh, I want to make a bunch of money. I might even have a great idea and really want to be a diplomat or, ambassador, perhaps would be a better way to say it, of Neapolitan pizza. So I will hire a bunch of people, do all the right things, and then, go sailing every day and not even be there. And it still could be good, but there's something about the devotion and the passion and the love that the Neapolitans put into that pizza that goes through their hands that is unparalleled.
I'm definitely with you there. And the other thing that I love, just in terms of the physicality of watching the process, is I love watching a pizza maker who is actually caressing the dough as opposed to pounding that dough out like it's a thing, but actually caressing it as if it's a living entity of beauty. And that to me is just, I'm fascinated watching pizza makers like that.
Yeah, they have a relationship with the dough because, as with anything in life, you can't put your foot in the same river twice. And a dough yesterday is not going to be the same as the pasta dough today. There's different temperatures, there's bacteria in different, in the air, there's different variables, the water, etc. So it's a relationship, and a really good pizzaiolo is going to have a very intimate relationship with the dough. And also, you don't want to knead it too much. You don't want to handle it too much because it'll lose its tenderness, of course. And of course, now the big trend in Naples is to have the dough as tender as possible and the crust as high now as possible. They've even come out with a new flour Caputo has called nuvola, which means cloud, which creates this incredibly puffy crust. But if you overhandle the dough, you're not going to be able to get it like that at all. So one of the big skills of a Neapolitan pizzaiolo is called the schiaffo, which means a slap. And what they do is they literally slap the dough out when they're making the disc. And what that does is that slapping motion, it actually pushes all the oxygen to the outside of the disc. But other than that, they're not handling it too much at all. And I think it goes, isn't it the same way if you're going to make a really good pie crust? You don't want to keep fooling around with it, right?
Right. You don't want to fool around with it too much, no. And I think you'll get a kick out of the fact that we have some very serious pizza makers in Iowa. And recently there were 5 of them in the KICI studio, 5 wood-fired pizza makers. And we did a session. And what I came away with was there is so much amazing passion among these people. They are so into making pizza, and they had such a great time talking amongst themselves because they were talking to fellow artists who were passionate about the same topic. And it was inspiring as a consumer to be in the room with these 5 people who were just talking about their love for pizza and about how every day they're, looking at their dough and they're feeling their dough and they're just seeing, what's this dough like? Because as you said, Matteo, it's a living entity and it changes depending upon the humidity and the temperature and, so many other factors. And so it was just a great thing. And that's the kind of place you want to eat in a place like that, where that element is so, well, first of all, it's the most important element of what they're doing, the dough, making pizza, but just that behind all of that is this amazing passion. And so I was really inspired talking to these guys, and it was a kick. And actually, we're going to get together again soon in the studio because they wanted to all get together again and talk more about pizza. So good thing, yeah, good things happening when you get passionate people together.
Even Pepe Starrite, at the end of my film, he basically says, you have to have heart, you have to have passion to make a good pizza. If you don't, your pizza's never going to be any good. And I mean, recently, actually, on my Instagram, last week I actually posted kind of a tongue-in-cheek video, but I took a video of pizza being made at Costco with these robotic arms spewing out what looks like ketchup for sauce in these discs. And there's just, if you want to eat that, great. It's not for me, but if it makes you happy, fine. For me, I would much prefer to make something that's made with love and with passion, and that almost constant pursuit of perfection, which is never going to happen in a sense. I mean, you're never going to make the perfect pizza, but that doesn't stop a good pizza chef from trying to make a perfect pizza every single time. And I love that constant pursuit of beauty and perfection, and to improve it.
Getting up every morning and saying the dough that I'm going to make today is going to be the best dough I've ever made in my life. Yeah, that's awesome. Can we digress for just a minute? Because I want to go back to talking a little bit about Naples, because I certainly did not have an appreciation for the historical place that Naples has in that part of the world. And I think that it would be great if you could just tell our listeners a little bit about this city and its place in terms of its amazing history.
I wanted Naples to be a character in my film as well. I thought of Naples as a character, so that we had pizza, and then of course all the elements of pizza, and then I had Arrangiarsi, that whole subject matter, and then of course Naples. And you can't talk about pizza or Arrangiarsi without discovering this very vibrant and historical and important city. Actually, Naples was the largest city in all of Europe in 1600. And it was, I think in the 1800s, it was the third most industrialized place behind London and Paris. It was founded even before Rome. It was founded by the Greeks in, I think, 500 or maybe 600 BC. It was a Greek colony, and the Greeks called it Neapolis, meaning new city. It was their new city, and that's where the word Naples comes from, Neapolis. So there's an incredible amount of history there, with not only Romans and before them Greeks, but Naples has also been invaded by so many different cultures, including the Austrians, the French, the Spanish, the Lombards, the Normans, the Arabs, and the Germans, actually. So you have all of these different cultures, which you can actually see in the city. When you look at the architecture, you'll have, a very, very old church, and right next to that will be a church that might have come 200 or 300 years after that, and it's a very, very different style. And you could see, oh, well, the Normans built that one, and then when the French came in, they built this church. So it's quite a fascinating place, and it's actually the most intact historical center of any city in Europe. Nothing has really changed in over 2,000 years. It has the largest historical center as well. So you have all of this history.
And I think you even mentioned, didn't it, that it was also the center of shipbuilding at one time?
Indeed, it was the center of many things. There was an incredible amount of industry there, including all of the shipbuilding, the railroads. They built all the railroads for Italy before Italy was unified. But there were many, many other things at Naples were the first seismology, the first earthquake studies, and they created the first center for that in the world. Naples was the first city to have street lamps that were powered by gas in Europe. The list goes on and on of all the things that the Neapolitans created. I happen to pick up on pizza because I guess that was the most obvious thing and most interesting thing to me, but Naples has given the world an incredible amount, including Commedia dell'arte, that form of theater with those crazy stock characters, and the guitar and the mandolin were both invented in Naples. The guitar and the mandolin, as we know it today, just like pizza, were invented in Naples. So it's a very vibrant, very beautiful place because it's right on the bay. And there's all of these hills and cobblestone streets that are made from this volcanic stone that comes from either Vesuvio or Campi Flegrei, because Naples is situated in between two volcanoes. So you have this kind of carpe diem mentality that's been there for over 2,000 years. Like, okay, this thing could blow any minute. We might as well live life to the fullest and enjoy life, because we could be destroyed by a volcano anytime.
So let's look at the different elements then. Now, I just want to make sure that everyone understands that we are talking about la vera pizza napoletana when we're talking in our discussion, the true Neapolitan pizza. There are many, many styles of pizza that anyone in the States can experience: Chicago style, Detroit style, New York style. I mean, it's just endless in terms of what's available. But for the sake of our discussion, we're talking about true Neapolitan pizza. So let's look at the different elements and just kind of go through them a little bit. So let's start with the flour, first of all.
Well, the flour with a Neapolitan pizza has to be made with a 00 flour. It's a very, very fine milling process. And not only does the 00 flour have to have that grain, so to speak, that fine grind to it. So it's almost like a powder, as you know, Steve. The other really important thing is it has to have a protein content about 12.5%, 13%, somewhere around there. And that's very, very important for a Neapolitan pizza. And the reason is, especially if you're doing a double rise, a fermentation process of 16, 18, 24 hours, you're going to have enough protein, i.e. gluten. You have to have enough protein to support the dough from rising, literally the fermentation process, so the stuff can grow. Without enough protein, the yeast is never going to grow, and it's never going to create oxygen, which is going to give you that beautiful puffy crust. So the wheat and the flour is very, very important. There are, I'd say, 3 or 4 major flour producers in Italy that are used for Neapolitan pizza. I filmed at the Caputo Flour Factory, which has a wide array of flours. They have specific flours for, of course, pizza, which is a huge part of their business, but also they have ones for pastries and other breads and all kinds of things. They're in Naples, and they've been around for about over 100 years. So I chose to film there because it was in Naples. But there are other brands like Cinque Stagioni, the 5 Seasons, which is used quite often. And one of my other favorites is called Spigadoro, which I happen to think is an incredible flour. Those are all made for pizza chefs and for pizza making, but it has to be 00.
All right. What about the tomatoes?
Well, the tomatoes, that's a very interesting subject, at least for me, because the tomatoes generally are the San Marzano tomatoes, which is what is used in the Neapolitan pizza. In fact, a Neapolitan pizza, the tomatoes are not cooked. They go into that oven for 60 to 90 seconds. They go in raw and they come out cooked, but there's still a freshness to them. They do add some herbs and things like that, but it's not a sauce that people make on the stove for a couple hours or all day that they then put on the pizza. These are raw, crushed San Marzano tomatoes. A DOP, the protected destination of origin, that's what DOP means that tomato, that San Marzano tomato, came from a very, very specific area on the foothills of Mount Vesuvius. And in order to call it DOP, it has to come from that area, and it has to be certified by the Minister of Agriculture in Italy. However, I will say that I've had really, really good tomatoes that weren't DOP. Clearly, really good tomatoes. And I would say most mom and pop pizzerias in Naples are not necessarily using DOP. They're using fresh tomatoes, locally grown. And some of them use San Marzano, some of them use different types of tomatoes from that area as well. And it's incredible because of the volcanic soil there. And one of the reasons why the tomatoes, and in fact everything else in Italy, particularly in the south of Italy, tastes so good is because the volcanic soil. There's a tremendous amount of potassium in that volcanic soil, and that's what gives the flavor to the herbs and the vegetables and fruits. So, but you don't have to use a San Marzano tomato, but that typically is the tomato of choice. And what I've discovered in my own research, because I've grown them in California, and San Marzano tomatoes they're not really tasty in a salad at all. They have a very, very low seed content. They're not a lot of seeds in there, and they're kind of fleshy, so there's not a lot of water in them. So to have them in the salad is just not very good. They're just in some ways kind of tasteless. But as soon as you cook them on a stovetop for even 3 to 5 minutes, or put them in a pizza oven at 900 degrees, something magical happens with the tomato and it becomes incredibly sweet, incredibly creamy, and it's perfect for pizza. Or I like to use them when I make gnocchi or something like that, because you can cook it in 5 minutes. You can make a really good sauce.
All right. What about the mozzarella?
Well, the mozzarella, in Naples, they use two types of mozzarella. One is fior di latte, which means the flower of milk, which is a cow mozzarella. That, of course, is DOP as well. There's places that are stamped by the Minister of Agriculture to be DOP mozzarella. The place I chose to film at in Cilento, which is south of Naples, is called Venulo, and they're a water buffalo mozzarella farm, and they're Italy's only organic buffalo farm. So I happen to prefer buffalo mozzarella made from water buffalo. I just prefer the taste. It's also, buffalo mozzarella is about 10% fat content. So even though it's very, very light and very fresh and very and white, very, very white, it's actually kind of a fatty cheese. It doesn't really taste fatty in the sense that it's not heavy in your mouth or in your body, but it's definitely fatty in a sense of taste. It's creamy, and I actually really, really prefer that on a Neapolitan pizza. So I almost always get the pizza with buffalo mozzarella, preferably. The place, one of the famous places in Naples that now is open in London, and they just opened one up in Los Angeles a few months ago, is called Da Michele. And that is a pizzeria that was featured in that book and subsequently the Pray Love. They, at least in Naples, they only make two types of pizza, and they don't have buffalo mozzarella. They use fior di latte only. They make a marinara, which is just the tomatoes, no cheese, and then they make a margherita, which is the fior di latte. So that you can only get one of those two pizzas at Da Michele in Naples, and I think they also sell only water, Coke, and beer, and that's it. I prefer, which is another reason why I prefer to go to a place like Starita, which has 70 different types of pizzas at least, or when they're going to have smoked buffalo mozzarella, or they'll have a smoked fior di latte called provola, which that word provolone comes from. So at least the fior di latte has a smoky flavor to it, which I actually prefer.
Mm-hmm. Me too.
Yeah.
I love that. I really do. And of course, extra virgin olive oil.
Well, yeah, extra virgin olive oil is I could talk about that for another couple hours, but I will spare you from those details. But most pizzerias, I think, around the world are probably not using the greatest olive oil, because it's so incredibly expensive to use a real, true extra virgin olive oil that's actually made from real olives that have been harvested, preferably by hand, or at least handled, and not let to fall on the ground and rot. Those olives are, and those olive oils are so expensive that I would say even most pizzerias in Naples, I'm guessing, are not using the highest quality olive oil. But for my film, I of course wanted to dive into the best of everything, the best of the tomatoes, the best of the flour, certainly the buffalo mozzarella, and of course the olive oil. And it was quite an eye-opening experience to film in Chianti, which has the famous mix of 4 different types of olives that they use for the oil there. They use 4 different varietals, and that gives the olive oil a more roundness, that blend. It gives it a depth and a complexity that a monovarietal oil is never going to give you. Most olive oils in California are monovarietal. They're using an Arbequina olive, and I don't find those oils nearly as complex and tasty and beautiful and interesting as you would in a place like Chianti, where they're using 4 different varietals. 82% of all olive oil in the world, worldwide, 82% of it is fraud. It's lamp oil quality, and what that means is that those olives and those trees, for instance, there's farms in Australia, in Tunisia, in Spain that have 10 million trees, and it's so labor intensive to harvest those olives that they can't do it. It's too expensive. So they let those olives on those trees get so overripe that they fall down on the ground, they rot in with the soil and the insects, and then they have these machines that vacuum clean the olives with the dirt, with the bugs and everything. And so they have this rancid stuff that's been sitting there. I don't know for how long, weeks, days, who knows, but regardless, it's rancid. So in order to make that fit for human consumption, they have to deodorize that oil. They have to take the acid out of it because it can't, I think it has to be no more than zero.7 acidic level. They have to filter it, all the bugs, all the dirt, and then they generally inject artificial flavoring and artificial coloring into that oil because they've basically deodorized it to such an extent that it's what they call a neutral greasy fluid. There's no medicinal value to it whatsoever. And this is 82% of the olive oil worldwide. We're talking Bertolli, Star, Monini, most of the olive oils that you'll see. I would say 90% of the oils that you'll see at any grocery store in the States or even in Italy. If you go to a grocery store, 90% of them will be absolute garbage, including Whole Foods. If it says Mediterranean blend, I would beware. For me, basically, in oil, there's no reason to filter the oil. The only reason why they're filtering the oil is to get out the bugs and the dirt. You generally want an oil that's unfiltered, that's cloudy, and that has tannins and antioxidants in it. And it should be spicy, it should be peppery. In fact, the fresher the oil, the more spicy and peppery it's going to be. You should have that. When you have it, there should be a slight kind of burning sensation in the back of the throat where you have to clear your throat. You know, you're like, like that. That means that the oil is fresh. It's again, like the pizza, it's alive. That's what we all want in an olive oil. However, as I said, 82%, I would probably guess it's even more now, of olive oil worldwide is not that at all. It's garbage. It's what they call lamp oil.
Do you have any tips that you could offer for consumers, just, you know, how to go about? People are asking me all the time, Matteo. They're always asking me, well, how do I find a good olive oil? So how do I find a good olive oil?
If you know the brand and have already had that brand, of course, stick with that. One of the biggest rules of thumb I have is I hold the bottle up to the light, and if I could see through the oil, I generally stay away from it. It doesn't necessarily mean that it is lamp oil, but it's a higher likelihood that it is, because over time, a really good olive oil, like McAvoy, like the ones in Italy, they're gonna become clear over time. It usually will take about a year minimum for that to happen. But generally, as a general rule, if it's filtered, if you can see through it, I'd stay away. If it looks green, if it looks yellow, if what they call light oil, I would clearly stay away, because that stuff is fraud. There's also an incredible amount of mafia and fraud in the olive oil industry. That's one of the industries that the mafia is involved in for a variety of reasons, not only making money, but they also launder the other money that they're making. So if it says Mediterranean blend, I would clearly stay away. If it says packed in Italy, I would stay away, because what they're doing is they're shipping in rancid olives or even the oil from Tunisia, from Spain, from Morocco, from Australia, from places like this, and then they're packing the oil, you know, bottling it or whatever, and then it says stamped. They stamp it on the bottle, made in Italy or packed in Italy. That's a clear sign that that is garbage, quite frankly. Now, is it going to kill you? No. It does have artificial coloring, artificial flavoring. It certainly is not helpful. But again, we want something that is actually alive, like the pizza, because a really good olive oil is basically, it should be fresh fruit juice. Olives are fruit. And so it's essentially fruit juice. You want your fruit juice to have pulp in it. You want it to be fresh. You don't want it to be deodorized and injected with all these chemicals and stuff like that. Another thing another surefire sign to stay away from oil is, I think I mentioned the green color. I would generally stay away from olives that are made by big businesses, big companies like a Bertolli. They're not making artisan products whatsoever. You want to go with a small manufacturer, a small farm, a family farm. There are a few places, a few oils that I have seen from Italy that they do import in clear bottles, and they're very, very cloudy. And those are real olive oils. You can see it when you hold it up to the light. Oh, this is real. But generally, that's the biggest rule. Stay away from big companies and stay away from olive oils that you can see through, or that say Mediterranean blend or things like that. California olives, as I said, are generally a monovarietal, and those tend to be more healthy or more healthful because they have antioxidants and tannins in them. However, my experience looking and tasting California olives is a lot of them are actually kind of, I would say, semi-agribusiness as well. They're grown off Highway 5, and they're really, really big farms. Is it real olive oil? Yes. Is it harvested and produced in a really good and beautiful and pure way? I highly doubt it. And you can taste it. The other thing about extra virgin is all that really means is extra virgin. It means it's the first pressing of the paste. Cold pressed doesn't really mean anything either. What you really want is first cold pressed. Now, any olive ranch or farm that is pressing their olives and it says first cold pressed, that means that the paste of those olives cannot go over, I believe it's 70 degrees Fahrenheit, something like that, 70 or 72 degrees Fahrenheit. And if you're in a farm or a factory that is, the olive oil is, it's very hot and they're not keeping it cool, obviously that stuff is being oxidized and it's becoming rancid. And so that's why that standard is there for first cold press. Everything is very, very cool and nothing is becoming rancid. So that's another thing I would look for a good oil. It's particularly one that's made outside of Italy. If it says first cold press, it's highly likely that it'll be a real olive oil and healthful rather than a lamp oil, which is ubiquitous from the most beautiful grocery stores like Co-ops and Whole Foods and Trader Joe's to markets like Ralph's and Vaughn's or places like that, which you're probably never even going to get a real olive oil in a store like that. Highly, highly unlikely.
Matteo, I want to go back to the film at this point because I want to talk about, I would like you to talk actually about, for me, one of the most critical elements of the film, and that is some wisdom that was imparted. And it was imparted actually by a barista who used three different elements, described the most important critical elements. I think he was talking about coffee, but they could be applied to pizza and the culture, any other aspects of life itself. And those three elements, I believe the barista was from the Grand Cafe Gambrinus, maybe, if that's right.
Yeah, Gambrinus. Yeah.
And then he said those three critical elements were passion, heart, and love.
Indeed. And that is really what Naples is all about, first and foremost. And that was one of the reasons why I wanted to make a film primarily about Naples and, of course, pizza. And it's because despite all of the problems that city has had, especially over the last 160 years since they unified Italy, that is the takeaway you get from Naples, is that there's this heart there. In fact, all of the Neapolitan songs, they're all about the heart. All of those songs, O Sole Mio and all of those things, it's all about the heart. Above all, as I said, in spite of all the problems, including the Camorra Mafia and the unemployment and the really serious problems that city and whole area in general has, that's what you will feel from a barista or from a pizza maker or from any person in Naples. And that to me was something that I wanted to focus on for this film. There's been plenty of other films that have made about the mafia, about gangs and things like that. And those can be very, very good, like Gomorrah, that movie. I've seen it, I think, 4 or 5 times. It's a masterpiece. However, my work, at least in this lifetime as I see it, what I'm interested is showing something that's not seen as much or that's overlooked, because for me, Naples is a hidden gem. There's so much history there. There's so much beauty there. And not only in the land and in the food, but but definitely in the people there and in that heart where you'll go up to a barista. And I just went up with a camera. I walked in with a camera, and he didn't know me. I'd never met him before. I just walked in filming, and I asked him a question, and he just rattled off this answer. And you can, again, taste that in the food. You can taste it in the coffee. In fact, part of that heart, to me, lies devotion, which is something that Italy has an abundance of in their cuisine, in their kitchen, as they call it, that devotion to making something with their hands, making something beautiful, because it's not only nourishing your body, but it's nourishing your soul. So in terms of coffee, Naples, it's the best coffee in all of Italy. It's unparalleled. And one of the reasons is they have very special coffee machines that they don't have in the rest of Italy. And in Naples, the espresso machine and how they make cappuccinos and everything it's a high pressure machine that's hand pulled. They have these big levers that they pull rather than just a push button espresso machine. So a really good barista with his or her heart is going to put their devotion into figuring out what the weather is like. Just like a pizzaiolo, they have to adjust the grind. They will adjust the grind of the coffee in Naples 2 or 3 times a day because of the weather, the temperature, the humidity. They're also, with the hand pull levers, they're adjusting the amount of time that the water is going through the ground or the grinds. They can also adjust the pressure accordingly as well. Whereas in a push button machine, you're never going to get handcrafted coffee like that. So I find that incredibly beautiful, that the Neapolitans will go to such a bother, so to speak, or to the extent of making everything handcrafted, like a pizza or a coffee, a simple thing like that. And I think invariably when you look at the most beautiful things in life, like a really great espresso or a really beautiful pizza, they're the simplest. And then when you dive into the simplicity or the simpleness of the art form, you find out, oh, well, this actually isn't really as simple as I thought. It comes out being simple because it's just a few ingredients, but actually when you dive into it, it's very, very complex. All the ingredients, and like I described with the coffee, these specific machines. Like anything, you dive into something and you're like, there's a whole other universe behind the facade or behind the surface.
Right. And all I can say to that is bravo. Thank you very much for the film Arrangiarsi, Pizza and the Art of Living, and your insights that you provide today with on all these different topics. We really appreciate it. I've been talking with Matteo Troncone, the filmmaker behind that movie, Arrangiarsi, and that is his personal love affair with Naples and communicated beautifully in the film itself. Thank you very much for visiting with us, Matteo. You've been listening to Great Taste on KICI 105.3 FM in Iowa City. I'm your host, Steve Boss.